tensions with the United States over trade, the Middle East and the war in Ukraine. Israel's deadly strikes on Iran just hours before the summit have added fresh urgency to the agenda. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has confirmed the Iran-Israel conflict and nuclear risks will be a key focus for leaders. Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada says he hopes to focus on economic security, supply chains and global stability, but the presence of President Donald Trump has raised concerns about potential flashpoints. Many recall his sharp exit from the last G7 summit in Canada back in 2018, with discussions set to run through until Tuesday. Leaders from countries including Ukraine, India and South Korea will join parts of the summit with the 7 G7 countries, which could shape the direction of global diplomacy in the months ahead. Well, these talks do come amid uncertainty, wars going on across several different continents, but several topics to be discussed. Joining us first to do that is Terry Malevsky, a former correspondent at the CBC and the author of Blood for Blood, who is joining us from Ottawa. Thank you very much for being here, Terry. Let's look at
Thanks
Canada.
for the invitation.
No worries at all. Let's look at Canada and Mark Carney. Of course, somebody who is new to the job, generally new to politics, and now hosting a meeting at a time of such uncertainty globally. That must be not a burden, but a serious task at hand.
Yeah, he's got his hands full. There's no doubt about it. I mean, these things get out of control very quickly, and especially if Donald Trump is attending and says anything at all, who knows what could happen. However, Canadians know this, most of the world probably doesn't. That there's probably not a finance minister anywhere in the world that doesn't already know Mark Carney. He's been around a long time. He's been in the circles of power, knows his way around palaces and presidential lodgings. So he's up to it. He's not going to drop the ball, at least not publicly. And I think that he may even succeed in focusing some, if not all, of the minds present on the issues that he has officially written on his agenda. But there's no question that much of that is going to be hijacked, whether he likes it or not, by what's happening in Ukraine and, of course, in the Middle East.
Yes, absolutely, that those wars ongoing. I do want to talk about trade with you, Terry, as well. Of course, Canada has been involved in disputes with President Donald Trump, as several nations have. We know that conversations have taken place with key negotiators over potential deals. The United Kingdom have a deal in principle that is in place. But how significant is trade at this summit, and do we expect talks to be happening on the sidelines, maybe bilateral or even trilateral, to try and get those deals closer to being done?
Well, by trilateral, I'm guessing you're referring to the Canada, Mexico, and the US, in which case the last deal that people made with Trump when he was in his first term of office collapsed because Trump tore it up, which raises the question, what's the use in talking to Trump? What's the use in negotiating a deal which, who knows, he'll rip it up again. So that is, you're right, a very live issue, and that could throw the whole thing into a cocked hat. Then there's the question of, a very important question for both sides, relations with India. There's going to be this, as you mentioned, also an invitation has been sent to Prime Minister Modi. He's going to attend. The Indian attitude is, we're there because, we think that Canada will now behave itself better now that we're rid of Justin Trudeau. And the Canadians think, now that Justin Trudeau's gone, maybe we'll have a better chance of a better relationship with India, because they were on the brink of signing a free trade agreement. They were getting quite close on a free trade agreement before what happened. And you'll recall, of course, the mysterious murder of a former Air India suspect, and then, even more significant, the murder of an important figure in the Khalistan separatist movement in his just outside his Gurdwara in Surrey, British Columbia. And that, of course, as you know, threw the Canada-India relationship into a tailspin. It's now in a deep freeze. There are no high commissioners from either country, hardly any diplomats still working. So that has to be fixed somehow. And how is it going to be fixed at a time when both Canada, which has a number of prosecutions pending against what they believe to be Indian origin gangsters, and accusations against Indian diplomats of crimes of coercion, extortion, and even murder inside Canada on Canadian soil. And also at the same time, the United States Department of Justice has a case against a former, now former, Indian spy, an intelligence officer in New Delhi, who is alleged to have fomented the plot to murder Gopatwant Singh Panoon, the head of Sikhs for Justice. Again, the Khalistan threat is much more palpable for the Indian side than for the Canadians. The Indians blame the Canadians for letting it get out of hand and pandering to terrorists, they say, and the Canadians say, "Well, free speech, you know, you're allowed in Canada to fly the Khalistan flag and shout Khalistan Zindabad. It's a free speech country, that's not a crime." So how do you untangle that mess in order to restore what is an extremely important relationship for both sides? And that whole long paragraph I just gave you, that's all about just two of these countries. Three, if you count the United States, which up to now hasn't really mixed it up with India to the extent that Canada has. How Carney fights his way out of that corner, how Modi fights his way out of his corner, because he has been accused of fomenting murder on Canadian soil, is a mystery. But the one bit of good news I'll finish with, try to brighten the picture, is that both prime ministers, Carney and Modi, are sending a message that they intend to improve the relationship. They want to put all of that Khalistan stuff on a sidetrack, focus on trade, have some happy talk, maybe restore diplomatic relations, and so they're sending a message that they intend to restore the relationship. Whether they can achieve it at a time when, let's face it, the Canadian Prime Minister can't call the police and say, please drop the charges against these guys because it would be diplomatically inconvenient. Well, the police will say, sorry, we don't dance to your tune, Prime Minister. So yes.
Terry,
it's a
I'm sorry to
tale,
interject.
And I don't think they'll get out of it very quickly.
Terry, apologies for cutting you off short there. We do have some breaking news that we are going to bring you away from potential diplomacy. Israeli military says it has begun a wave of strikes against dozens of surface-to-surface missile targets in western Iran. This comes after Iran launched missiles to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem this evening. A potential further escalation. Joining us to discuss that is Berzin Wagmar from the Centre for Iranian Studies, the SOAS University of London. Berzin is also joining us from London. Thank you ever so much for being here. That news that further Israeli strikes is not a surprise, but targeting surface-to-surface missiles, how significant is that in the escalations that are ongoing, and how might it limit further escalations, given that it could cripple some of Iran's ability to strike Israel?
It is absolutely imperative that Jerusalem continues so relentlessly and audaciously, and that what we have seen in the last 2 days is that Prime Minister Netanyahu's so-called alarmist brinksmanship was no mere fiction, but something that was held all along and has come to pass. Consider the fact that DNI Tulsi Gabbard, in her Senate intelligence hearings, actually went on record to state that there is no credible evidence of Iran actively pursuing nuclear weapons, which is absolute nonsense, given the fact that on the 31st of May, the IAEA report mentioned that Tehran has actually enriched up to 60% weapons-grade uranium and is in possession of 400 plus kilos of uranium as such, which would be enough to mount on 10 nuclear warheads if that it were to break out and pursue that completely unfettered. In so doing, it is obviously violating the NPT, and that Iran stands, quite frankly, in flagrant violation of everything that it has stood for and given to understand so long hitherto. And in defiance of the IAEA, much before what has just happened in this most recent escalation, the enrichment facility at Fordo had been expanded, and 3 more facilities had also come on the map, including Varamin, which is just southeast near Tehran International Airport, Varamin Prefecture, and Turkuzabad as another ballistic missile site. So it is important that Israel does this, and 2 things stem from that. You see, it's entirely useful that Iran is desperate and continues this scattergun approach, which indeed it is doing. And of course, in that, it is taking out Jewish lives because it is not targeting Israeli military or official establishment sites. It is wantonly, maliciously targeting Jews because obviously eliminating the Jewish state has been part of Tehran's raison d'etre since 1979 and the Islamic Revolution. Make no mistake about that. So that is what we see in the difference of targets in this 1,200-mile difference between Jerusalem and Tehran, and also in a bid that this would deplete Iran's stock, which indeed is happening. Not to mention that they do have these Shahed 136 drones which are being deployed and which they've shared with Russia to decimate Ukraine, as we know. And all in all, that will continue. But Israel's triple defense system has worked flawlessly so far and will continue to do so, including the anti-missile THAAD batteries that they have procured from DC last year. Not to mention the Iron Dome. So that has helped and kept fatalities in Israel quite low for now.
Yes, and Berzine, of course, we know that this will be a key part of discussions at the G7 summit. We've heard that a joint statement will be released on the tensions from the countries at this G7 meeting and summit that is taking place in Alberta, Canada. How will that go about, and how significant is it that the G7 in this moment, given that the tensions are so new, are strong with their messaging and united with their messaging, given the wider geopolitical ramifications that this could have?
I can best answer it like this. Would you mind momentarily forgetting the G7 and look at the Islamic world and the Arab world at that? Not a pipsqueak. If anything, Jerusalem has picked up the slack and is doing the dirty work for the Arab world, particularly the GCC states, who must be breathing a sigh of relief to see all these Iranians down like 9 pins. All of them part of this murderous terror exporting regime since '79, and who were a constant and present danger to all the GCC states, all of who have suffered in the last 40 plus years from Tehran's proxies and funding of, say, hijackings, seditious movements in Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait and elsewhere, Shia irredentist movements and the like, not to mention the Arab world at large too, that is the non-GCC Arab world. None of them are, in the name of Islamic unity, are coming to Iran's aid or even making any blandishments. You can expect the West, like the Japanese Prime Minister has actually gone on record to state that Israel's actions are intolerable, quote unquote. That may be so, but Israel is undertaking the dirty work for everyone. And even if some leaders don't have the gumption to admit it, that may be so because Trump doesn't want to invite the ire of Tehran.
Berzine, sorry to cut you off. We do have some more breaking news to bring you on this topic. I will come back to you. The United States Embassy in Iraq has issued a security alert warning of possible attacks on locations frequented by Americans. This alert comes amid rising tensions between Israel and Iran and growing regional unrest. The embassy in Baghdad stated it is aware of an increased risk of violence targeting US businesses and spots commonly visited by American citizens. It has urged all US nationals to avoid public gatherings and areas frequented by foreigners. This comes as Iraqi activists have called for a massive protest near the Green Zone, home to the US Embassy, demanding the mission's closure and the immediate exit of diplomatic staff. Berzine, coming back to you, a huge development there. We, of course, saw Donald Trump withdraw staff from several bases ahead of the strikes from Israel. We now understand from information following those initial attacks on Friday that the US were aware that potentially a preemptive move to the preemptive strikes, but this, a risk for US personnel in the Middle East. What is the ramifications of that, given that we know Donald Trump has already warned if strikes are taken against US personnel, US ships in the region, it will have huge consequences. Berzine, your thoughts?
Well, Tehran will invite Trump's flak, who has been holding his hand hitherto. The security directive issued for the US Embassy Baghdad comes on the heels of that issued for the US Embassy Manama, Bahrain as well, 3 days ago. So Iran is simply trying to resurrect some of its proxies, and let's face it, parts of Iraq are a client state of Iran and has been so since 2003. The Shia militias, the Kataib and the Ashaib al-Ansar and the others who are on Tehran's payroll, they are being whipped up into psyching the situation and therefore calling for these protests, not which are necessarily welcomed by all Iraqis, least of all Sunni Iraqis, who are fed up of Tehran's meddling in Iraq and Iraqi politics as such. So Iran is banking on this as one such proxy, given that there is nobody else in the region. Precious little to show for other proxies insofar as Hamas and Hezbollah or the Assads were concerned. They're all down and out and on the ash heap of history.
Berzine, I do have another very brief update. It's not breaking news, but it's something that we should inform people of. Public safety guidelines, this from the Israeli military, has included the closure of schools, this extending until 8 p.m. local time on June the 17th. The messaging clear, a state of emergency extended. This public safety guideline also extended to June the 17th. Further escalation has been seen. This messaging potentially showing that further escalation is also expected. I want to thank our guests who have joined us, Terry Milevsky, and also thank you to Berzine Wagmar, who have joined us. We, of course, are coming in to this G7 summit. Leaders are arriving, but a key topic, Israel-Iran tensions, will continue to rumble on and be a talking point here on NewsX World and at that summit. Make sure you're watching here on this channel for all the updates on both and everything else from across the world.
I'm Megha Sharma and I'm in these gorgeous locales of Crises. Crises is the location where the G7 Leaders Summit is taking place between June 15th and June 17th. The global heads of the biggest economies of the world are going to descend in this place, including the United States President Donald Trump, the French President Emmanuel Macron, and the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. It is a summit that is going to be overshadowed by the Israel-US-Iranian conflict. It is going to be overshadowed by the Ukraine-Russian tensions. It is going to be overshadowed by the Gaza-Israel conflict taking place in the Middle East. So stay tuned on NewsX World with me as I bring you the latest updates from the G7 Leaders Summit.